Tony Evans is a well-known and highly respected pastor, recognized for his powerful sermons and deep connection with his community. He has dedicated much of his life to serving his church, where he was not just a leader, but also a mentor and friend to many. His role in the church was significant, and his words often touched the hearts of those who listened. People didn't see him only as a pastor, but as someone they could rely on and look up to. However, recently, shocking news spread across the community. Tony Evans was suddenly fired from his church. This unexpected announcement left many people confused and surprised because his presence in the church seemed strong and steady, and no one imagined such a thing could happen. Now, after some time, Tony has decided to finally break his silence and share his side of the story. This is his chance to speak honestly and openly about what really happened, and to let everyone understand the truth behind the headlines. It's a moment for Tony to raise his voice and tell the story that many have been waiting to hear. Before Tony Evans was fired, there were signs that things were not as smooth as they appeared on the surface. The church had grown a lot over the years, and with growth came new challenges. While Tony remained deeply committed to his work and the people he served, some tensions started to build behind the scenes. These tensions weren't obvious to the congregation, but were felt among the church leadership. Differences in opinions began to emerge, sometimes about the direction the church should take, sometimes about decisions regarding management or finances. Tony, known for his strong beliefs and clear vision, occasionally found himself at odds with the church board or other leaders. Though these disagreements were never openly discussed with the public, small incidents hinted that the relationship between Tony and the church leaders was becoming strained. Despite all this, Tony kept working hard, focused on his ministry and the community. But beneath the surface, the growing divide was quietly widening, setting the stage for what was to come. The day Tony Evans was fired is a moment he will never forget. It started like any other day, but soon, everything changed. He was called into a meeting with the church board, not knowing what to expect. When he arrived, the atmosphere was tense, and the conversation quickly took a serious turn. The church leaders informed Tony that they had decided to end his role as pastor. For Tony, this came as a complete shock. He hadn't seen it coming, and the news hit him hard. There was confusion and disbelief. How could this happen after so many years of service and dedication? To make things even more difficult, the church did not give a clear public explanation for the decision. This silence led to many rumors and speculation among the congregation and beyond. For Tony, it was a painful and confusing experience, a moment when everything he had worked for seemed to crumble in front of his eyes. The day Tony Evans was fired was a turning point in his life, one filled with shock, confusion, and deep disappointment. It began like any other day at the church. Tony had arrived early, ready to prepare for his usual sermons and community meetings, unaware that his world was about to change forever. Later that morning, he received a call asking him to come to the church office for a meeting with the church board. When Tony entered the room, he immediately sensed something was different. The air was heavy, and the faces around the table were serious and tense. Without much warning, the leaders told him that they had made the difficult decision to terminate his position as pastor. For Tony, this news was completely unexpected. After years of dedication and countless sacrifices for the church, hearing that his journey there was over felt like the ground was pulled from beneath his feet. Tony tried to understand the reasons behind the decision, but the answers were vague and left him feeling frustrated. There was no clear explanation shared with him or the congregation, which only added to the confusion. It felt as if years of hard work and trust had been suddenly dismissed without proper closure or respect. The church leadership's silence on the matter after the firing created a space filled with rumors and speculation among church members and the wider community. People started questioning what really happened, and many were left with more questions than answers. For Tony personally, the moment was painful not only because of losing his role, but also because of the way it happened, without warning, without dialogue, and without transparency. He felt hurt and betrayed, but at the same time, he knew he had to find a way to process this loss with grace. It was a moment that challenged his faith, tested his strength, and marked the beginning of a new, uncertain chapter in his life. Very difficult and emotional period. Behind closed doors, he struggled with feelings of betrayal and confusion. The pain wasn't just about losing his position, it was about the way it happened, without warning or clear reasons. Tony spent many quiet moments reflecting on everything that had passed, trying to make sense of the situation. At the same time, he kept thinking about the people he had served for so long, the congregation that had become like family to him. Their support meant a lot, but there were also many questions and doubts among them. Some members of the church were shocked and saddened, standing firmly by Tony and expressing their support openly. Others, however, found themselves unsure about what to believe, influenced by the rumors that filled the silence left by the church leadership. The community around the church was divided. Friends and neighbors discussed the situation, wondering if there was more to the story than what had been shared. This division added to the pain, making it clear that the firing was not just about one person, it affected many lives. For Tony, the aftermath was a test of his faith and resilience. He chose to remain quiet publicly, deciding to process everything internally before speaking out. This silence only increased curiosity and speculation, but Tony felt that it was important to take the time he needed to heal and find clarity. Despite the challenges, many people continued to believe in him and hoped that one day he would share his truth. The community's mixed reactions showed just how deeply Tony's role had touched people's lives and how much they wanted to understand what really happened. The period following Tony Evans' firing was one of the most challenging times in his life. Behind the public silence, Tony grappled with a complex mix of emotions: hurt, disappointment, confusion, and even a sense of betrayal. Losing his role as pastor was painful enough, but the suddenness and the lack of clear explanation made it even harder to accept. Tony spent many sleepless nights reflecting on the years he had poured into the church, years filled with hard work, sacrifices, and deep connections with the people he served. For him, the church was not just a workplace, it was a community, almost like an extended family. Letting go of that felt like losing a part of himself. At the same time, the congregation was left in shock. Many church members were devastated by the news. They had trusted Tony for years and felt a strong bond with him. His sermons had brought hope, guidance, and comfort to countless individuals and families. When the firing was announced, without much explanation, it left the congregation confused and searching for answers. Some stood firmly by Tony, showing their support through messages, calls, and gatherings outside the church walls. They expressed their sadness over the loss of their leader and questioned the church leadership's decision. On the other hand, there were members who were uncertain or hesitant, some influenced by rumors and speculation that spread in the absence of clear communication from the church. This created a divide within the community, with some supporting Tony openly and others unsure about where to place their trust. Beyond the congregation, the news affected the wider community as well. Friends, neighbors, and even other local churches began discussing the situation. The lack of transparency led to many questions. Why was Tony fired? Was there something more behind the scenes? People who had admired Tony's work felt a sense of loss and concern. The silence from church leaders only fueled the speculation, making the situation more complex and difficult for everyone involved. For Tony personally, the aftermath was a deep test of his faith and character. He chose not to respond publicly right away, preferring instead to take the time to heal and reflect. This decision to stay silent was not easy, but he believed it was necessary to gather his thoughts and emotions before speaking out. During this period, Tony focused on his personal healing, leaning on his faith and close friends and family for support. Though he was hurt, he remained committed to staying respectful and professional, refusing to let bitterness or anger control his actions. After months of quiet reflection and healing, Tony Evans finally decided it was time to break his silence and share his side of the story. This wasn't a decision he made lightly. For a long time, he had held back, wanting to avoid unnecessary drama or conflict, and to respect the privacy of those involved. But as rumors and questions continued to swirl, Tony realized that speaking honestly was the only way to bring clarity, not just for himself, but for the community that had supported him for so many years. In his first public statement since the firing, Tony spoke with calmness and honesty. He expressed that his goal was never to create division or to point fingers, but to share the truth. He explained that the situation was complicated, involving differences in vision and leadership styles that gradually grew between him and the church board. While he respected the church and its leaders, he acknowledged that these differences made it difficult to continue working together. Tony also addressed the pain of being let go without a clear explanation and the impact it had on him personally. He admitted it was one of the hardest experiences of his life, but emphasized that he chose to respond with grace and understanding rather than bitterness. Throughout his statement, Tony remained professional and sincere, showing humility and strength. He took the opportunity to thank the congregation and community members who stood by him during this difficult time. Tony made it clear that his faith remained strong and that he was committed to continuing his work in ministry, just in a different way. He emphasized the importance of forgiveness and healing, encouraging everyone to look forward with hope rather than dwell on past hurts. By breaking his silence in this thoughtful and respectful way, Tony was able to bring much-needed clarity to a confusing chapter. His words helped many people understand the reality behind the headlines, and his message of resilience and faith inspired hope for the future. After sharing his truth, Tony Evans began looking toward the future with a renewed sense of purpose and hope. Though the chapter with his former church had closed unexpectedly and painfully, Tony knew his journey was far from over. He spoke openly about his plans to continue his ministry, but in new and different ways that would allow him to grow both personally and spiritually. Instead of focusing on what was lost, Tony chose to focus on what could be built ahead. He expressed a deep desire to use his experience as a lesson in resilience and forgiveness, not only for himself, but also for others who might face similar challenges. Tony emphasized that setbacks, no matter how painful, don't define a person's path. Instead, they offer opportunities for growth and transformation. His message was clear: healing is possible, and moving forward requires faith, patience, and an open heart. Tony also reached out to the community with words of encouragement. He urged those who had been hurt or confused by the recent events to find peace and forgiveness in their hearts. He believed that holding on to bitterness would only slow down the healing process. Instead, he encouraged people to focus on rebuilding trust and unity, reminding everyone that a strong community is built not on perfection, but on grace and understanding. Finally, Tony shared that he was excited about the future, about new projects, new ways to serve, and new relationships to build. Though the path ahead was uncertain, he was confident that with faith and perseverance, good things awaited him. His story became one not only of loss, but of hope, resilience, and the power of moving forward after hardship. After finally breaking his silence and sharing his side of the story, Tony Evans turned his attention to the future with a sense of hope and determination. While losing his role at the church was undeniably a painful experience, Tony refused to let this setback define him or his calling. Instead, he saw it as an opportunity to grow stronger, to learn, and to serve in new and meaningful ways. Tony openly acknowledged that healing from such a deep wound takes time. He spoke about the importance of patience, not rushing through pain, but allowing oneself the space to grieve, reflect, and eventually find peace. For Tony, faith played a central role in this healing process. He leaned on his belief that God's plan is greater than any hardship, and that sometimes difficult moments open doors to new beginnings. In interviews and conversations since then, Tony shared his vision for the next chapter of his ministry. He spoke about exploring different ways to connect with people, whether through smaller community groups, online platforms, or outreach programs that focus on helping those in need. His passion for teaching, guiding, and inspiring others remained strong, and he was determined to find fresh paths to make a positive impact. Tony also addressed the community directly, recognizing that the firing had caused confusion and hurt among many. He urged forgiveness, not just for others but for oneself. He explained that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing what happened, but rather freeing oneself from bitterness and pain. He encouraged everyone to work towards healing broken relationships and rebuilding trust, understanding that true strength comes from compassion and unity. Furthermore, Tony emphasized the importance of resilience, the ability to bounce back from adversity. He shared that setbacks are not the end but part of the journey, and that every challenge offers valuable lessons. He encouraged those listening to embrace their own struggles,